Hello, M&A scientists. Here at M&A Science, our goal is to continuously expand our understanding of M&A and use that knowledge to create top-notch training programs and resources. By visiting mascience.com, you'll find all the information you need to take your M&A skills to the next level. Get started by signing up for a free weekly newsletter to stay up to date on the latest courses, upcoming events, and expert interviews. Again, that's mascience.com. I'm your host, Kison Patel, CEO and founder of M&A Science. Joining me today is Andrew Morbitzer, VP, Head of Corporate Development at Typeform. Typeform is a software as a service company that specializes in online form building. Today, we're going to talk about how to execute product-based acquisitions. Andrew, how are you doing?
Awesome, Kison. Thank you for inviting me and including me.
Well, thanks for taking a break from doing deals to have this conversation. Can we kick things off with a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. First, I want to say this: it's fun that you came up with this idea around product-focused M&A for a few reasons. I love the connection to your informative work, and a shout out for your book on Agile M&A. There is a direct connection to Agile in the product world and how Agile can absolutely increase the quality of deals that are made. So I just want to help folks make that connection. And so thank you for that. I started off life, and the reason I'm telling this is just because a lot of people, like 90 maybe % of people, come to this role through either some kind of a strategy and consulting firm, or maybe even more likely through investment banking. And I started off life different. After graduate school, I was actually an engineering leader working on applications, databases, hardware with large enterprise customers at IBM. And I got beyond engineering, just it was a necessity of the job to find the connection with customers and work through their needs. So it wasn't just programming to a spec, but it was actually testing a lot of things with customers and figuring out what worked and what didn't. And it was illuminating to take what was words on a page and really figured out what was disappointing or angering customers. And I couldn't describe it well at the time, but it was a learning lesson on differentiation and what makes somebody who's a customer or who knows their customers express love, and be able to take action off of that customer love. Or, where do you get kind of the milquetoast response, or even something that's, anti-love, which is often hard to hear, but super informative, and helps you make much higher quality decisions much faster. And this product foundation got me into marketing, because then I was in a role where I had to figure out, how to get customers to respond and purchase and actively participate. And I knew somewhere along the way that I had to get better at leading people, leading businesses. And I went on a mission to find somewhere where I could go get better. And that was Intuit, which, I had to work hard to find my way into. It's an amazing shop, amazing people and business leadership facility. And I got in there. I met my first real godparent in the working world, Stephen Aldrich. Special shout out to him. He's also a godparent for the Oakland Roots or the Oakland Soul soccer teams, if you want to look them up. It's a love of passion and investment and time and expertise for him. And he thought my background in product and marketing and strategy, along with personal attributes of loving to meet new people and really understand people, what would make them tick, would be a good fit for strategic partnerships and M&A. He later sold a company he was CEO of to GoDaddy, as KKR and Silver Lake were taking GoDaddy private, where I went to work then for my second godparent, and worked for him for 9+ years, longest that I have worked or probably ever will work for somebody. 9 joyous, action-packed, learning-filled years for David Popowitz, who is just amazing. Look him up. That led to a long string of successes at GoDaddy, which we can talk about today.
It's quite the background. I like how you went from this essential engineering product to marketing strategy, now M&A. How does that particular background that you have, because it is different than the traditional go through investment banking, private equity, end up in corp dev. How do you think that brought in some maybe different elements or perspectives in your role today?
Yeah, there's some things that you still have to have. I through MBA and on the job training know corporate math at its basics and fundamentals of what makes a company run. And certainly when I'm doing M&A, I always have an amazing business analyst as a partner, somebody who has come up through the more traditional analysis and iBanking side of the world. I will say on the product side, first, anybody can learn this. So it's, fun for me to talk about and for you to invite me here. It's not magic, it's time developing expertise. This is the old 10,000 hours idea of what makes something go. And so for me, I think, you play to your strengths, right? And playing to strengths for me around the product and marketing foundation, it has allowed me to do some things that have been very helpful in attracting the right targets and setting them up for success. One is that when I go and I meet founders, and I meet a lot, I meet tons, hopefully talk to a new company every day. And often with founders, to build the relationship, it's around their product dream. That's why they started the company to begin with. Sometimes they're not product people, but for the most part they are. And they had a vision, and I'm able to most often build a bond with them over the shared view of their dream around the product, what that can do for the customer, how it's differentially better than what's in the market, and then how that would match up with the company that I'm with, who's the acquiring entity. And I've had multiple founders tell me that was the key in getting them to listen versus other outreaches that they have. So maybe that's helpful, especially in the last few years that have been a really competitive market. The second is, having spent a lot of time looking at product and marketing from different directions, it has enabled me to be competent to at least a certain level at leading the product and the experience and the marketing analysis, so that you can identify, or I can identify with the team, clear strengths, the challenges based upon customer insights, a little bit more about what the state of the market is. So it's firsthand knowledge. Again, not necessarily magic, but it's just a strength of a lot of experience there I can play to. And then the last I would say is that most often in product-based acquisitions, the sponsor is a GM or a CPO who's a heavy product-based person. And this is an ability to be able to create a connection with them, to create a bond with them around the criteria that are going to matter most, how that accelerates the strategy rooted in what's different about each potential target. And then I can be the one who self-evaluates those targets pretty deeply from a lot of different points of view that are especially rooted in product and customer.
So let me see if I got this straight, because I think these are your unique differentiators. The ability to leverage that background to build relationships, understanding the customers in the marketplace, and then also essentially the product strategy and being able to really see how these pieces are going to come together and work with that team to make it happen.
Yeah, I think so. You're saying for me, I think that is true. But it also matters for product-based acquisitions. And somebody who approaches this, who has more of the traditional M&A background, typically they partner up with somebody. I had a number of amazing partners at GoDaddy who were day job version of a CPO for the divisions, for each of the divisions at GoDaddy that they were in, right? So they bring all these capabilities too, but there have been times where I've actually been in the role of, substitute head of product or PM for areas, or, where I can bring an additionally beneficial angle to it. So it is a little bit me, but it's also, what helps somebody in the role for a product-based acquisition.
Let's break down product-based acquisition. How is it different from any other acquisition?
There's so many good types of acquisitions out there, market consolidation and buying customer bases and all sorts of fun things out there. I think for product-based acquisitions, beyond saying that, yes, we want to have a great technology or experience or capability, that it's at the foundation of a product-based acquisition is really rooted in, it should be absolutely rooted in your company strategy, which I hope is something that most people would agree to. It fits within the definitions of what makes sense, but I've seen that not be true, unfortunately. So I do say it. There should be direct line of sight to the company strategy, and then the criteria should be around how products are actually going to accelerate the strategy or make the strategy happen. Oftentimes it's not an acceleration. You have a company strategy where there's a hole in it somewhere around product. So it's specifically what product's going to do at the foundation, which should be your first criteria. They're not your only criteria, maybe equally weighted, but it's in the case where product-based is the first thing that you're going to evaluate on. And so targets have to meet that product criteria first before any of the other criteria should be evaluated to come true. The reason I say that is if you're doing like a market consolidation play, you may not care about product. You may be just pulling a number of different companies together to buy a share, or it could be you're just buying customer bases to put on your existing product, in which case the other product doesn't matter. So having that product focus, what makes it different is you don't pass go without making sure that the product hits your criteria and that you know why. And some examples I have of where that's mattered are one where there was a really important growth area that we were getting into, and it ended in the end being a new division. We actually folded some other acquisitions that we made underneath it and some existing operations. And what mattered most was that the product matched what we had in the company strategy. We had a number of different companies that we looked at. We got down to, I want to say 3 that we were really serious about. And all of them scored super high on the product, which was what allowed us to move on to the other criteria and eventually determine the winner. And the winner was determined then based upon other criteria, but it was only after getting the product fit right. Because in most situations, if you're buying in on product, it's been a mistake that I've experienced in a number of ways, both firsthand as well as nearby, to say that you're going to go fix product later. And so you really have to score very high on that when you're de-risking an acquisition. I'll give you another example of a product based acquisition where it mattered for us. Is we had a strategy. We needed deep expertise that was different than hiring some really good programmers, but say, hey, this is the product you're going to go build now, even though you've probably never built that before, but you're really good in this language, right? That's more of an organic growth, organic development scenario. We were in an area where we needed expertise that had been proven, where people had, bumped into the wall a few times and had to retool how they were building the product, how they were developing product market fit in this super particular category. But what we ended up doing was evaluating them based upon their products, customer love around the products, but those weren't the products that were going to be the big scale that we were going after in our strategy. So we actually bought them, and we wanted the technology, but what we really wanted was the team, and the proof that that team was amazing was in their products, but we needed the team to go build something that we thought was a much bigger opportunity than the existing product category that they were in. But it was having that product first that enabled us to develop super high confidence in that team. So that's just kind of a twist on it. And the last thing that I wanted to say as I was thinking about prepping for this is kind of what's changed in product-based acquisition, especially that makes it different. And everybody who's been to any kind of a business school, one of the early things that you learn is the idea of build, buy, partner to go solve problems, which is an incredibly powerful framework because everybody understands it, so you can move through it in about 5 seconds. The buy part of that has traditionally been often looked at as the most heavyweight, or the one that's got the highest set of hurdles to it, because people think that acquisitions, they think a bunch of different things about acquisitions, but it's just looked at as heavier weight. And I will say, again, another plug to your concept on Agile-based M&A, certainly we know now how to make acquisitions more successful. We know how to make them lighter weight. But I will say, as you think about software always getting compressed in the stack, what was great capabilities last year are table stakes this year, and you've got to add up. You're able to buy product-based capabilities that enable you a certain tempo that I think is much more accepted. I've seen it be much more accepted in the market now. So it does call for a more agile, but very, very much methodically driven approach to product-based acquisitions, so that you can do it with also a high success rate while you're trying to move with the tempo of the market. And I think that that's something that's new, is that capability-driven, higher tempo acquisition around products that's now totally okay and expected by many acquirers out there.
Why is that?
I think that there is, M&A for a lot of time was very well developed on the finance and financial analysis side. I think it was the history I had seen when I read everything I could when I first got into the field was hit or miss from a product perspective, whether it was really going to work out or not. There's a great story that I point people to that I think I talked about on your podcast last week, but I just tell people to go read it all the time. It's old now. It's an HBR study of Pitney Bowes when they were doing a corporate transformation, and the HBR story is called "Rules to Acquire By," and it's very template-driven, methodical, learning-based approach. And it's older, so it's not as agile as your agile approach is now. So it could use some updating, but the concepts hold true there. And when you apply those to product-based acquisitions, you go through a number of steps, learning steps, get better each time, de-risk, figure out what matters so that you can focus on that, and where to be super time and resource efficient with the rest. And I think that was just hit or miss before. And more companies that I've talked to practitioners at, as they've gotten methodical on this, and now it enables this higher tempo while not being hit or miss on the fit with the product against their specific strategy.
I want to go back to when you talked about the product market fit in general. I guess tell me more about that and how that fits into this. How do you gauge it?
I have strong experience and evidence-based opinions on this, that when the market is hot, don't often allow for the approach and the specifics that I'll share to get exercised, because I guess companies, people, cultures get pushed to move fast I'm not making a judgment on that. What I'm saying is that I've got a couple of things that I'll share that take time, and they take resources, but I found them to be super effective. So I'll share them, and then people can do with them what they will. The first is, when I join companies, and this is important too, because this is, helps people calibrate whether it's right for them or not. I want to go somewhere where there's a special focus on the customer, a special mission that they have, something that's different. And there are companies that I've looked at that's not the case. They're out there for things that are probably far more valuable to investors in Wall Street around, just super focused on profits and say profit margin expansion. And if customers like it, that's okay. But that doesn't necessarily get me ticking, when I go to a new job, or when I get up in the morning to go to my current job. So I want to find somewhere that customers really are the focus of the company. And within that, when we look at targets, we look very hard at what I call customer love metrics. The shorthand, very scientific approach is Net Promoter Score, right? Or these 9s and 10s, are these things that customers love so much that they can't help telling friends about it. And so many, many, many times, to the point where at GoDaddy, we had this for a while until I left as a best practice for each acquisition, is we ran for shorthand, what we would call a Net Promoter survey. And that was a survey that we would get the targets, if there was 2 or 3 on the short list, we many times ran this with all of them to do for their customer bases. And yes, this can be potentially a little disconcerting to them, because it could be, make or break based upon what we learned, but it also gives them tremendous insight into the customers that they have in a way that they probably don't have the time or money or resources to go figure out. And typically, companies that are on the short list are really confident in their product and the experience, and the customers love them, so they're happy to show that off. So it's really should not be seen as a threat. So we'll develop a whole survey that is all about the product, all about the shopping and the purchasing and setup and first use experiences, and what the customer care experience is like. And we're trying to pull out as many things that we can that match our strategy to help us evaluate, but that also point out where the company and its products are special and different. And, anybody watching this, your product teams are already doing this today as they figure out new product categories to get into, or even major new capabilities, so you should be doing this too for product-led M&A to match with your company, to build on those strengths, to take advantage of the belief that your product teams have in this, so it's all for the same reasons. Second thing is spend time talking to the customers. I will tell you that when I go and I talk to customers, it takes a lot of time. This is probably the hardest thing in the world to carve out. It's a skill that Scott Cook taught us at Intuit. He did it. Brad Smith, when I was there, talked to customers, not just talked, but went out. Scott's methodology was very much around direct customer observation, because what you can see is often different and richer than what the customer is going to tell you. And so we would go do direct observation. And so, try and do both. It is so time consuming that almost nobody does it, honestly. But the stories that you have in your head enable you to personally build confidence, and it builds your credibility. You'll find yourself reusing these stories when you're getting other people on board with why this is a great product acquisition category to be in, why this is a specific target that is especially better for you. And so while it's hard to carve out the time to go do and may push people out of their comfort zone, it's just fantastic what it allows you to do to set an acquisition up better for success. And then another point is proof at scale. So this is an important one. At every company that I've been at, people want to talk about doing acqui-hires, or it's lighter weight to get something that's small. We can get a small team. They'll integrate faster. There's less heavy machinery for us to do on integration, and there's less of an existing customer base that we'll have to figure out what to do with, which are all true. And in cases where you're looking at expertise that you want to acquire to go do something that maybe is a little different than what we're doing there now, fair points, and should be considered. But the challenge is, if you want to get into a product category that a team is working on, you want scale as much as you can to get proof that this is going to work for you. So if you're trying to de-risk, you want to see customers across time to help figure out product market fit. You want to see that the customers are retaining and what their engagement metrics are. And you need a larger data set to do this with. And that definitely helps you figure out product market fit. And then the other thing that I thought of to share is reading reviews. So sometimes there's marketplace reviews, which is good, not as many as I personally would like, but you can find reviews. G2 can be fascinating to read through. And I spend a lot of time, I've always got a G2 tab open, especially when I'm talking to new companies. While I'm talking to them, I'm going through and seeing what their customers say and how it's changed across time. What were customers saying a year ago versus today? And a part of that is to avoid when you're trying to figure out the fit. Like if you go to G2, they'll show you what the person's role is, the size of the company, and all that helps, right? Because that's the market. You're trying to figure out, do these products fit? Avoid the professional reviews. There's a lot of them out there, like top 10 lists, heavily influenced, if not completely influenced, by pay to play. And I find that, honestly, I just want to say they're garbage. And so if you're trying to be very clear on your time and avoid gray areas, I would say put those in the do not do category. When you see them, don't click through, just keep going for the quality ones that are actually by customers.
Can you go back to direct observation? How do you do that?
And Intuit, for direct observation, we actually went to customers. So Intuit maintained customers, and then we picked this practice up to a degree at GoDaddy, although a lot more online at GoDaddy. Intuit maintained relationships with customers where customers had opted into research to help make the products better, to give feedback on new concepts that were coming out, business models, pricing approaches, that kind of thing, so that you had a mix between the quant and the qual. And you need both. The quant doesn't give you the context, and the qual doesn't give you the data set to have confidence. And so this is about the qual, but it's more what Scott told, it's the aha moments. And so I will tell you, there was a lady in the East Bay who was using our point of sale service that was desktop software at the time, and she was running a Yahoo store. And sending her a survey on her needs told us that she wanted to have a connection to her online store and her in-person store. It was going and seeing her talk to customers as they came in the door, literally sitting on a stool behind the counter and just taking a morning and, thanking her for it, trying to buy her lunch, trying to be unobtrusive so that we didn't interfere with her business, sitting on a stool and watching customers come in the door. And she would jump into a mode where she was trying to help that customer. She would check them out as they would leave and there wasn't another customer. She was over here on a laptop updating her Yahoo store. And when she was showing us inventory in the back and she had to enter it in Yahoo store and in our software separately, the sales were tracked separate. She had to redo all the product descriptions. And it was viscerally seeing that pain and seeing where it was and seeing some insights into how she was doing the work that she wasn't even describing to us, because while they were a huge pain, she was a frog in the boiling pot of water, and she realized that she had the pain. And that gave us insights into specifically the products, which there were two that we needed to acquire to solve her pain in a way that would cut her workload down from, literally two full-time jobs to get it back to one where that's where it was. And if we could accomplish that, that would be a game changer in the market. That was the aha moment where we could do something different than nobody else was doing that was absolutely right on top of a brutal pain point for the customer. She didn't tell us she told us about part of it, but she didn't really tell it to us, and we didn't get the pain until we saw it and we could see through it in an even stronger way than how she would describe it to us.
And what part of the deal life cycle would you do this?
So that for us was earlier in the strategy, because that was figuring out more specifically the criteria around what we needed to go buy and how that created a better business outcome for us, how that was going to lead to customers and revenue. The work that I've done around customer love metrics comes once you've got your short list, and who, and it's a sliding scale. You don't stop and go do this stuff, but as you can see, you can ease in, okay, these are likely to be the two companies or the three companies that we're most focused on. And you should be trying to do analysis on the raw data they're providing you at that point on customer behavior, marketing metrics, efficiency metrics for the company. While you're pulling that apart in parallel, at that point, your customer love metric analysis will determine, do they really make it onto the short list? And if so, do you prioritize one or the other, based upon what you learn? At a minimum, it provides an amazing amount of two things. One is validation on who you've picked on the short list. That's super powerful inside. And that's why it may come later in the stage for that one. And the other thing is it gives a lot of input into the integration priorities for the roadmap ahead.
This is all part of preliminary diligence then?
Yes. This is not, hey, we're negotiating a term sheet or we've signed a term sheet and now we're into formal diligence mode. That's right.
Are you getting these introductions through the company? It's, hey, I'd like to do some direct observations with your customers here.
It's interesting how to do that. So you can, and I try, because I want the company involved. I want to build confidence in them. I want to build trust. So I always start with the target. If they won't do it, you really need to get underneath why. And there could be concerning metrics under there. Off the top of my head, I'm not coming up with anybody who's said no and we've moved forward with a deal on. So I think that's partly an answer right there. You do it with a company, and I would always start with the target. At the same time, you want to go find your own. It's often like hiring a key hire, where you may talk to the one or two references they provide, but for the most part what they're going to share. You're just looking for things that they might emphasize different from what you found in your process of evaluating them, and then you want to find one or two others that they didn't share. So we will see if we can find additional sources, I'll say. One of the areas where it's interesting, where we've done a lot of research earlier in the process that helped us both identify targets as well as get insight into targets, where we did it without needing to talk to the targets. There was no kind of moral ambiguity, as in open source spaces. And I'll give one in particular, WordPress. WordPress sites are built with technologies from anywhere from a handful to too many other companies. And so as somebody who hosts WordPress websites, you can see these technologies and they're your customers. So you can go, look at volume by brand or by type of product. You can get some info on usage rates, and you can even talk to customers and figure out use cases. There's a whole bunch of stuff there that with your own customers, if you have a large enough customer base, you can do upfront in the cycle that helps get you focused later on.
When I look at this, it seems like we do these product-based acquisitions. There's obviously the product integrations got to go well, but then a big part of it's the overall go-to-market. I want to spend some time walking through that, and I wanted to first start looking at the customers. How do you approach looking at overlap and analyzing, and then sort of go from there?
Yeah, so it's really important to have defined, there's different names for it, but it's your prototypical customer, it's your ideal customer, the attributes of those customers, and how those tie again back to your company strategy. The analysis of the base of customers that target has and who they're going after can lead to an overlap analysis. It can show you what the TAM is for the near term, which will give confidence into your most immediate components of your business case. There's oftentimes where, and I mean oftentimes, where I've been surprised at who the target told me their customers were and who the customer base analysis shows us who their customers actually are. So oftentimes it's a good chance because maybe as the acquiring entity, you have different resources and maybe more resources than the target in this particular area. So you can teach them more about their business. But it used to be that we would find open market data to help with the overlap analysis. And then once we got down to the short list, we would literally have each of us send our customer bases to a certified third party who can do this analysis to give us all the insights on the customers, who were customers that we had in common, and what was the distribution of customer types, what were the attributes of the customer types, without each of us seeing the other's customer base. That's still true. I would still do that today. There's products out there. Crossbeam is a good one. Reveal is a good one, that are cloud-based services that let you see overlap analysis. That's very helpful for marketing purposes today. So just absolutely great products out there. There's one in particular I'm thinking of as we talk through this, where the general market fit showed an 82% overlap in the specific customer profile and their use case, and what we had for actionable M&A. So it gave us confidence, this 82% overlap, that the M&A path that we were on was super valid for the business and for the business case.
So when we do this analysis, what point in time are we in life cycle?
Let's see, for a target analysis, for a deal analysis, I think the overlap analysis and doing the TAM analysis is when you have a target, really. If you can find independent data sets, that's great, but often this is something that you have to do with the target. And this is one of those things that you have to take the time, you have to put the resources into to show whether you have the overlap in the customers, and where there's not a direct overlap today, but where you have TAM that's a shared TAM, whether it exists, builds confidence in your acquisition case, and how you're going to execute then to acquire customers going forward.
Back to preliminary diligence.
Yeah. As well as validating diligence for the particular targets or the short list of targets that you have.
What are other key components in terms of thinking through go-to-market? Because it sounds like a lot of this stuff is shaping pretty early in the process. what else do we need to do to make sure we nail that and this deal is successful?
Yeah, I think one of the first things that I was thinking through and prepping for this that I have found is to, again, this may be one of those common things where you think, okay, that's just a yes, I agree, I get it, that's good enough. But my experience shows that is not necessarily true, and that's around not just taking it as a given what the bankers give you or what the company sends you. I think it's an imperative from a product perspective and from a marketing perspective to do your own analysis on raw data and to form your own set of database conclusions independently from what has been provided to you by the company and the bankers. An example I have of that is there was a company we were looking at, relatively large acquisition versus our size, founder-led company, so it had a lot of good attributes going for it, and had a big name banker, and with their team they were doing the sell side while we were doing the buy side. And the end result of it from our analysis was that we could not find a way to make the model work. We couldn't find a way to keep customers engaged. We couldn't find a way to grow the company profitably, and neither could they, based upon the data that we shared with them. So the benefit of doing the firsthand analysis ourselves was that we were able to see that that particular target was not going to be a successful business. Like I said, we couldn't get it to figure out a way to be successful, nor could they. So it was unbelievably powerful that we did the analysis based upon firsthand data. I think you were asking, what are some of the challenges that go in there? I think that meeting the team, practice working with the team is really fundamental to get out of the meeting rooms. I think you and I were talking about this a little bit ahead of time, meeting in person where you can practice and build and execute the plan together. So it means that the people part of it is every bit as crucial as you would want it to be in a product-based business. Yeah. Did I lead you off course a little bit there, or was that?
I'm taking notes. Some of this stuff I want to wrap up in just the elements of thinking through how do you make go-to-market successful, because you're putting a lot of these things up front. We talked about direct observation and doing that as a form of diligence, proof at scale, looking for some real retention patterns as this grows customer base, online reviews that are unbiased, unauthentic, and then also analyzing the customer overlap to really get a sense of how's this going to look like when you bring it into your ecosystem. Are there other elements that we want to put considerations on when we're planning around this deal to make sure we execute and have a good, solid go-to-market to make it successful?
Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying to me about the things that I'm sharing being upfront. There is a lot that I've shared that's upfront. I also think it goes all the way through. So this is getting down to your target, understanding their customers, the customer usage, understanding for that particular target how they will be successful based upon the product fit and based upon the business approach that they have. So I think that it goes all the way through, from strategy and planning through identifying targets, evaluating targets, and then getting to who you're going to do a deal with. So I hear you on upfront. I think that I've seen it just be super important all the way through to the point where you get a deal that you're going to pursue with the target. The one part that I wanted to bring out when you were asking that is that I think the integration, we talked a little bit about this last week in your pod discussion, I guess I'll call it, in the group discussion last week, is that the the analysis, the business analysis, I would say that the integration, so the formal diligence should have all of the engineers and the product in it. It's more than just analyzing the data that the company has sent across. And I have found it to be very successful to have that be the same team that's responsible all the way through, from planning up front, target identification. Typically, those are heavy hitters focused on that, and product-based acquisition. And it should be the same people going all the way through the formal and diligence over into integration planning and integration execution. So I didn't bring that up. I didn't bring that out strong enough early on, but that is one thing that I would encourage people to be really consistent on, and not have those be separate components or separate teams.
Create this continuity between diligence and integration, which lends to gathering all this information in diligence that essentially could be utilized to better execute integration, better plan integration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big piece of Agile M&A. Can we talk more about that? Because I think you had a good point about being agile through this and how it's been trending more so in that direction. What does being agile mean to you?
There's some good work in here, and I will say, yeah, your book is a fast read. I think it's a good one from a product perspective, and then from a deal perspective. It is it's very important to have a learning and a feedback, and either maintain or improve rapid cycle approach that is something that's repeated on a regular basis, so that the teams have a chance to provide feedback, and the analysis and the data can show if you're staying on course, so that you can make rapid corrections within defined periods of time where people give feedback and make the corrections that are published, and it becomes part of a system and a process and a learning model, as opposed to some of the early M&A that I was involved in when I made the career move over, where it was very methodic on specific hard dates that were long out, very specific on people's roles. And so it seemed like set in cement versus rapid trial and rapid, I guess I would say, updates.
That's fair. That it's just being more iterative in the process and collaborative at the end of the day.
Yeah, great way to summarize it. Yes.
If anybody had questions, I see Chris has had his hand up for a while.
Hey, Kison. Andrew,
Hey,
thank you
Chris.
for the. When it comes to the integration of engineering teams, that's where I often see the most friction in regards to ways of working and culture. And I was just curious what your experience is in getting engineering teams integrated and starting to work together.
A common refrain that you'll hear from me. Wow, what a powerful question. I guess I was gonna start with the response, but I will say one thing up front is I love that you're focused on engineering and product-based acquisitions. It's the engineers who are crucial to whether the acquisition is going to succeed or not. Super important in that is I have found many times that it's the engineers of the acquired entity who are the ones that stick around the longest. I've experienced where they've been into the acquiring entity for years, and the care with which the mission and the plan is written down for the engineers of the entity that's doing the acquisition, that entity that's being acquired, to fit together is just crucial. That planning, the getting the teams together, very strong opinions, having a culture where people listen to each other is everything. So it's a fantastic question, and just absolutely at the rock of whether or not you're going to get the teams to work well together, to be productive together, to solve problems together, or if they're looked at as two separate entities, which happens all the time because you've got two really proud engineering organizations who are confident in having it be their way, is how the acquired entities are going to work together to do engineering. So it's very collaborative and planning based and feedback based, and spending a lot of time on culture from the leaders to make it fit.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was awesome, Chris.
Yeah, there are no silver bullets there.
No, hard work. Oh, by the way, one quick thing I wanted to share too on that is for product-based acquisitions, it's super clear, and I have been on multiple facets of this to know whether the products that you're bringing in are intended to be part of the mothership or whether they're intended to be a different form of its own entity in some way. And the approach that I was around early on in my career was a very gentle, phased approach, thinking that we were being respectful to both sides to get to know each other, practice working together, and merge together over time. And not invariably, but almost invariably, it led to calcification of an us against them. Sometimes it was really unsaid and very hard to uncover. But once that sets in, it's almost irretrievable. So I would say to your question, Chris, having the discussions during the deal cycle and coming to firm agreements on how the team's going to get together, and in particular, the engineering team is going to come together. Engineers care about career paths and what's the development process, what's the development methodology, do they have free time on or no meeting Fridays, or once a quarter code jam sessions. All these things have risen in my mind to be topics to be dealt with during the deal cycle and during integration planning, because if not, you're just highly likely to lose a team that you won't get back.
You got any other big takeaway tips on doing product acquisitions?
My last one that you and I have talked about before, but this is something where I am dogmatic, religious, militant on, is proactive. And you and I had talked a bit about some mistakes I'd seen. There was a guy who was a really famous CBS golf commentator and coach for PGA people, and I had a chance to meet him quite a while ago and discuss a business idea about like video-based coaching of the people. And one of the things I learned from him is he only ever shows people the positives. He's always repeat the positives and make those better, just totally ignore the negatives. So it was a very clear approach. And I've got this very clear approach to M&A. And whenever I have seen a reactive, like somebody comes to me trying to sell something, like I learn if I need to learn, but otherwise I'm just very respectful, efficient with everybody's time, and say no. And I feel strongly that in product M&A, the only ones that I've seen successful and the cornerstone of deals that I've been a part of or that I've driven that have been the most successful is where it was 100% proactive, meaning you started company strategy, product strategy, M&A strategy, get your criteria right, identify the targets, screen them super well, and set them up for success. And the things that come to me over the transom at best are learning opportunities. People get emotionally attached to them. You bend your strategy to look at them, and I haven't seen them work. So if that's a word of wisdom here at the end,
that's a framing for our next conversation. I think that could call for a sequel around that whole topic.
I love it. You can tell I'm not passionate at all about it.
Suppose a company acquires a target which includes competitive products in their existing product portfolio. Example, CR company acquiring another CRM asset for their BI and dashboard capabilities. What are some challenges the company may face in terms of competing product roadmaps, and how can they mitigate them through diligence integration planning?
So I have been involved in a number of these. And in the spaces I've been in, They have well-developed competitors, and a key way to grow is through M&A. So you just have to take this head on. It's important to have a strongly shared starting viewpoint, right? We have to be agile. We have to be willing to learn. We have to be active in learning and active at making decisions about what we've learned. There's no passivity here to make these work well. But it's important to have that starting viewpoint. And the starting viewpoint is, are we going to bring the customers together? Are we going to bring the products together? Because your teams need to analyze the work that's required to do that and build that into the integration cycle. And it's a hit. This isn't even with well-structured data. I've been around well-structured databases, front-end oriented data that's well-structured. And even in those scenarios, you add a fair bit of time in before you really hit the road running at the product vision that you have, if you're going to be a branded house. If you're not going to be a branded house, and there's plenty of those out there that run really well, it's important to have that viewpoint too, so that you don't spend time trying to merge the products or deconflict. The CEO at my last company had done a number of acquisitions in the travel space, and the point of view that he had with them is, let those teams all run and compete at the front end in the marketplace, because that's what made them desirable to be bought in the first place. And what they did was they connected data systems on the back, areas where they could squeeze a lot of margin out of purchasing different travel properties. They all shared those. So they had this point of view. And the most important thing is to have a point of view. There's no right or wrong. If there's two competing CRM systems and you end up with them, your answer for your organization is likely to be radically different from 10 other companies that would answer that same question. So it's not that there's a right answer. It's that there's an answer for your company, but you have to establish that early and not say we'll get to that later. Getting to that later, just you lose the business premise, you lose the teams. So start somewhere and then be super active about figuring out if that's right as you execute.
Answer the tough questions early. All right, I'll try to get one more in from Laura here.
Hey, Kison. Thank you.
Hey, Laura.
Thank you, Andrew.
Hi, Laura.
This has been a great discussion, and just sort of given a lot of the lead-ins and the inputs, right, to drive for better outcomes. Can you share just either average time or range of time from a first meeting with a team to maybe an executed LOI?
As much as I've tried to shorten these, and I'm super respectful that there's competitive environments happening often, especially for better properties, in which case we have worked literally nights and weekends, and you figured out what are the things that are inviolable that you're going to figure out before you make a deal, and then you're willing to throw a lot of other things overboard. That's an exception case. It's often from when we agree with a GM and a CPO that this is the category that we're going to prioritize next. It's magically, no matter how we've tried to shrink it without really doing exceptions, it's pretty much 6 months to getting to an LOI, getting the strategy, getting that aligned with the CEO and the CFO. And we do a lot of test cases. We may actually test partner with companies that are in there, and you can cut those things out and shrink the time. First discussion with a target, I think one of the easiest ones, because I know the calendar time I did it, was with a European company, and it kind of went like clockwork from first discussion to putting a verbal offer out was 6 weeks with a target. It took us 2 weeks verbally to negotiate, and then it was like 5 weeks to get a signed LOI. And then it was about 8 weeks after that. We were US based, they were European, so we had to get advisors lined up to get to a signed agreement. And that one, to me, because we've discussed it after the fact and we diagnosed it, felt to me like that was pretty prototypical. But the last acquisition I did on the way out the door at GoDaddy was with a founder who I love. We tried to buy his company. It didn't work, stayed in touch, and we came back and bought it 8 years later. And I've had some that were in the 4 to 5 year range. So So that's happened too.
Hey, Andrew, before we wrap things up, I got to ask you, what's the craziest thing you've seen in M&A?
Oh, gosh, well, two that were no diligence M&As that both flamed out, and one sold for like $1 and the other sold for something above $1 to get it back out of the books. So don't do no diligence M&As for the obvious reasons of the diligence part of it, but also that process is really important to build confidence internally. And so you end up without the data and you end up without the confidence. The other one that I saw was crazy was where a GM got emotionally attached to a deal that had support of literally nobody else, and it still went through because the company wanted to appease the GM.
Wow. Those are both pretty crazy stories.
Yeah, they're crazy. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, don't do those type of deals. That's the lesson there.
Right.
Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. I learned a lot, helped you become a better M&A scientist today.
Thank you for including me. And it was really fun, especially to have the questions at the end too. I love that. So thanks. This was a lot of fun.
For those of you still with us, thank you. Till next time, here's to the deal.